The term metaphysical poets denotes to a number of English poets of the first half of the 17th century. Okay, you can see in the map, or you can look for the timeline. It includes John Donne, JOHN John Donne, George Herbert, Richard Crashaw, Henry Vaughan, and Abraham Cowley. Okay, so literally meta means beyond. Okay, and physics means physical nature. Why this naming is done? The metaphysical poetry is predominantly intellectual. Okay, the metaphysical poetry is predominantly intellectual and analytical. Clear? This metaphysical poetry is predominantly intellectual and analytical. Their style, to say, is characterized by wit and metaphysical conceits. এই metaphysical conceits কি? Metaphysical conceits হচ্ছে একটা far-fetched or unusual similes or metaphors which are used. সেইগুলো দিয়ে কি? সেইগুলোকে প্রথমে দেখলে মনে হবে যে there is no similarity between them. Okay, there is no similarity between the things that are being compared, but apparently যেই আনলাইক একটা অবস্থান থাকলেও তাদের মধ্যে কি পাওয়া যাবে? তাদের মধ্যে অ্যাকচুয়ালি মিল আছে. There is some kind of similarity that is being shown by the metaphysical poets. Okay, the specific definition of wit which Samuel Johnson applied to this school was, and I quote, a kind of discordia concords, which means it is a combination, or they produce a combination of dissimilar images. Or there is this discovery of occult resemblance in things apparently unlike. ওকে, যে জিনিসগুলো প্রথমে দেখে মনে হবে যে তাদের মধ্যে কোনো সিমিলারিটি নেই, সেই জিনিসগুলোর মধ্যে কি হবে? সেই জিনিসগুলোই হচ্ছে তারপরে হঠাৎ করে যেন একটা অকাল্ট রিজেম্বলেন্স, হঠাৎ করে একটা মিল খুঁজে পাওয়া যাবে. ওকে, হঠাৎ করে দেখে মনে হবে যেন এই লিঙ্কিংটা, এই যে বন্ডিংটা, এই যে লাইকিংটা তো কোথাও দেখিনি. দে উইল কানেক্ট এভরিথিং. Okay, this works or this group of poets, and the works of this group of poets have several features in common. Okay, like the poetry is to a great extent lyrical. In subject it is chiefly religious or amatory, that is related to love, especially sexual love. There is much metrical facility even in complete or complicated lyrical stanzas and many other things. But the most important thing about this metaphysical poetry is this far-fetched imagery, which is called the metaphysical conceits. Okay, this metaphysical poetry, in this metaphysical poetry, emotion, or to say feelings, is expressed through working of the intellect. Okay, and this is how it is different from sonnets. Okay, here তোমার বুদ্ধিটাকে হচ্ছে বেশি হচ্ছে দেখানো হচ্ছে, সে কতটা বুদ্ধিমান, সে কতটা পোয়েটরা কতটা হচ্ছে জানে, তাদের জ্ঞান কতটা, সেইটা তাদের পোয়েট্রির মধ্যে দিয়ে হচ্ছে এক্সপ্রেস করার চেষ্টা করা হয়. ওকে, and at times what we feel, or at times in some poems we see that the poet's intellect appears to dominate his feeling. Okay, and it dominates to such extent that it is so powerful that it dominates all the feelings that are present. Okay, and due to this analytical habit, the metaphysical poets prefer to use words that call intellect into the play. Okay, they take pride in describing the intellect that they has, or they had, better to say. Okay, and one of the chief characteristics of the metaphysical poets were that the metaphysical poets wholly concerned to say something that had never been said before. Okay, যে জিনিসগুলো আগে কখনো বলা হয়নি সেই জিনিসগুলোই তারা বলার চেষ্টা করতো. They were not those people who were of the society. Okay, they tried to get away from the worn out and traditional ideas handed down to the generations of poets by Petrarch, and they rejected the Petrarchan cult of women worship. As I have told you before also, they regarded women as representative of their own nature of flesh and blood. Also, the metaphysical poets wanted to be startling. Okay, একদম হতবাক করে দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করতো, সবাইকে mesmerize করে দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করতো. They tried to mesmerize with their intellect. They tried to mesmerize everyone, their thought process, through their poetry that has been described in the poems. Okay, so but also in the manner of expression they were trying to get into this whole fold of expressing the whole situation. Okay, their poetry abounds in far-fetched similes and metaphors, as I have told you before also, which is called the conceits. And it is, if we look into this, it is a combination of dissimilar images, or discordia concords, better to say, সেইগুলো এখানটায় দেখানোর চেষ্টা করা হয়, এই পোয়েমগুলোর মধ্যে দেখানোর চেষ্টা করা হয়. Also, in metaphysical poetry, emotions are shaped and expressed by logical reasoning. যে কোনো তার ইমোশনগুলোকে সে তার ইমোশনটাকে ডাইরেক্টলি বলবে না, সে কি করবে, he will, or the expression will be like this: they will put on a logical syllogism, okay, cause and effect form, to impress the lover or to put forward their idea of the society. Okay, they seem to take the poetry to parade their knowledge, and their knowledge was vast. Their knowledge was in geography, science, medicine, navigation, warfare, and obviously classical mythology. So they tried to parade, they wanted to express their knowledge in everything through their poetry. Okay, তারা যে জ্ঞানী মানুষ সেটা তাদের লেখার মধ্যে দিয়ে দেখানোর চেষ্টাই করতো. Clear? And the picture they presented was that of this remote and the near. Okay, and why I am saying this absurdity of the metaphysical poetry is seen acutely in the manners of the poets, who combine this abstract and the concrete. They would combine two opposite things together. Okay, two apparently opposite things together. দুটো অপোজিট জিনিস সেটাকে একসাথে নিয়ে আসবে. ওই যে বললাম, মেটাফিজিক্যাল কনসেপ্টসের মধ্যে দিয়ে দুটোকে দেখে মনে হবে যে কোনো মিলই নেই. ঠিক আছে, তো টুইস কমিস্ট্রেস পড়তে গিয়েও দেখবি, বা পুলি রয়েছে, পুলি পড়তে গিয়েও দেখবি, বা ক্যানোনাইজেশন পড়তে গিয়ে দেখবি, সেখানটায় দুটো অ্যাপারেন্টলি আনলাইক জিনিস, সেই দুটোকে একসাথে কম্পেয়ার করা হচ্ছে. And that is the work of the metaphysical poets. Okay, so they bring in absurd things together. Okay, the abstract concept or the concrete, those two things are completely opposite. they are brought together. They brought together the remote with the near. ওকে, যে সমস্ত পুরনো জিনিস বা দূরের জিনিস আর যেগুলো কাছের জিনিস সেগুলোকে এক সূত্রে বেঁধে দিচ্ছে. দে উড টাই দেম আপ ইন with a single thread. They also tied together the physical and the spiritual, okay, the infinite and the finite. So everything, almost everything which was completely opposite to one another, they would be tied together, তাদেরকে একসাথে করে আনতো. And through their parading of their knowledge in several other sectors other than literature, they would do literature a great benefit by bringing in several knowledges of several other sectors together in literature. Okay, it is the most important thing. And what we find here is that this is important. And this metaphysical poetry or the metaphysicals use this natural language of men when they are soberly engaged in commerce or in scientific speculation, with the result that the words themselves, apart from their meaning. And what we find here is that by doing so, they presented a new type of poetry to us. Okay, one of the most important writers is John Donne. তোমাদের মেটাফিজিক্যাল পোয়েট্রির মধ্যে one of the most important writers হচ্ছে তোমার জন ডান. And his historical importance lies in the fact that he initiated this new school of poetry known as the metaphysical school of poetry. Okay, the Petrarchans have little to say about the joy of love, the deep contentment of the natural passion, but much about the pains and sorrows. Okay, the Petrarchans mainly focused on the pains and sorrows of love, pains and sorrows of being rejected in love and everything. Okay, so John Donne did what? He rejected this lofty Petrarchan cult of women worship and represented women as a creature desirable indeed. Okay, he rejects two highly regular meters that were present. Okay, যে ছন্দগুলো রয়েছে প্রথমেই বলেছিলাম in sonnet, there is this iambic pattern. Okay, but what we find here is that he is highly breaking those things. Okay, he rejected those things. These highly regular meters were monotonous according to him. Okay, and he broke those harmonious cadences of the Elizabethan period. Okay, because these are almost by the end of by the Jacobean period. If you remember the Jacobean period, you will remember the dates. Okay, he violates this iambic rhythm over and over again. Okay, this metrical innovation is to be seen in his satires, his songs, also elegies. Okay, he is the first in England of the regular classified inspired satirist. Also, his works are widely circulated in manuscripts, but unfortunately they were not published before his death. Okay, they can be roughly classified into love poetry, religious poetry, elegies and satires, his all poetry collection. Also, what he brought in love poems is that in place of Platonic vision of Spenser's hymns and petty or this Petrarchan conventions of sonneteers, what we find? We find that he is bringing in realism, not the realism of the modern age, but a realism which is often too sensual. Okay, and it had this some kind of mocking cynicism attached to it. Also, this style is dramatic and gives the illusion of excited talk. His John Donne's love poems, I am saying, John Donne's love poems are intensely personal and seems to be addressed not to a casual mistress but to one truly passionate loved. Okay, some perhaps it is ascribed to Anne Moore, Annemore. Okay, Air and Angels. Okay, and also in the Ecstasy and the Good Morrow, if you read. So what we find here is that this is all those things that is being presented. Also, John Donne's religious poetry was written after 1610. Okay, like love poems, his religious poems are also intense and personal. They reveal the struggle in the mind before they take orders in the Anglican Church, his horror of death, his dread of the wrath of God, and his longing for God's love. They are all the expressions of a deep and troubled soul, like you can see in the Holy Sonnets, a hymn to God the Father, and several others. Okay, John Donne is metaphysical not because of the substance of his thoughts, okay, but because of the conceits in which he clothed his thoughts. যেভাবে সে নিজের আইডিয়াসগুলোকে প্রেজেন্ট করছে তার জন্যে হচ্ছে সে মেটাফিজিক্যাল। ওকে, it is not limited just to the way he is telling, okay, or the conceits এর জন্য শুধু না। Clear? So these are the metaphysical poet. This is the metaphysical form, metaphysical poetry.